Today we are going to discuss about the course Service Oriented Architecture. Here we are going to discuss about Unit 3, which covers the basic principles of SOA, Service Oriented Architecture. Before getting into SOA, we have to know the main objective and outcome of the particular sections. So here the main objective is to understand the basic principles of SOA. Obviously the outcome has to be where we are going to apply this SOA concepts in the real time. It's an implementation concept. We say it's a web service area. So the main architecture here is we are going to represent it as a triangle-like architectures. So if you get to any research materials in the context of SOA, we can see this service-oriented architecture. Obviously, in case of most of the textbooks, we cannot visualize this type of practical examples like a triangle-like architecture. So now we can see we have a public subscribe system which is represented in terms of triangle-like architecture. We have a provider at one end and a consumer at another end, and we have a registry at the another end. So consumer, if you want to access any service from the provider, he has to first look up into the registry. So registry we implemented it as a UDDI, Universal Description, Discovery and Integration Service. This will consist of all the services which is posted by the different service providers. Also we can see this UDDI registry will hold the document called WGSDL, which is nothing but the representation of the service which is published in the provider end. So it will looks like a XML documents with several tags which represents what are the attributes used in the web service. For example, if you consider if you are used an addition service, we can see the methods what we are going to use is an add method which takes two arguments. So one argument, both the arguments has to be passed from the consumer to get the response from the provider. Then only we could be able to get the results of addition operation. So we are first looking into the registry and we are finding out the appropriate service provided by the providers, so that the registry will return a WGSDL document to the consumer. So which contains a complete description of the service which is published in provider end. So that the consumer now can directly communicate to the providers by having this WGSDL document. Since we have a complete description, we could be able to write the claim code based on the input which is acceptable by the provider end. So if your argument is going to be integers, while passing our SOAP message, we have to describe the data types in the HTTP protocols. So whatever here we are going to communicate through SOAP protocols, this SOAP will work on top of HTTP. So while making any communications, we have to make only through the SOAP protocols. So similarly, provider, if you want to publish any details, he has to publish only with WGSDL format. So it won't accept any other format. Next we can see some basic concepts like the normal SOA concepts will work in case of client server. In case of client server, we can have clients one another and server at the another. So if here we don't have a common registry, so we have a registry at the server end itself. So all that registered services will be present here. So if you want to access any service from the client side, we can send a message to the servers. So this message sending and receiving between the client and server has to be taken by some means of stub and skeleton. Stub is nothing but it's a service embedded in the client side for making a encryption decryption in the client end. For example, if you want to send a service from the client side, we have to take the service and you try to pack the service. That packing concept we call it as marshalling. And otherwise we can call it as an encryption. And encrypt and send the data to the servers. So that information will be sent over the internet as a TCP/IP protocols. So over the TCP/IP protocol only your data will flow and go to the server end. From the server end, before we are getting the information or service request from the client, that particular message will be in an encrypted form. So we have to decrypt it. That decryption process we call it as an unmarshalling, otherwise we call it as an unpacking. After making an unpacking, we have to see what kind of service is requested by the client. After that, we will be able to retrieve the corresponding services which is present in the registry. After that, we will be able to get the result which is displayed by the particular add operation. Then we will be able to send back the results to the client again through the same process. Like we have to make a packing or
marshal it at this server end. Again, we have to send the data over the internet. Again, in the client side, the stuff which is present, it will do an encryption and unmarshalling, and then it will deliver the result to the client. This is the typical client server model, works like an SOA concept. Again, if you go and compare with a distributed oriented architecture model, that we call it as a distributed paradigm. We have a clients and we have a server side services, and it uses several technology like remote procedural cards. Earlier methods we use an RPC, remote procedural card, then we have used an RMI and then CORBA, common request broker architecture. After getting maturity over this type of RPC, RMI and CORBA, now we move towards a web service. Web service is nothing but it's a SOA implementation, service oriented architecture implementation is, we call it as a web service. And again, this SOA get matured and get integrated with all the emerging technologies like grid computing and cloud computing. Now, a lot of people started using the cloud service based on the SOA architecture, which is nothing but a web service implementation. So, all the cloud service which is going to be used by the users is going to be work on top of SOA only. This is the main outcome. That's why we go to learn SOA for the practical implementations. So, everything what we are going to implement is going to be done in terms of service. This will be going to be an outcome of the particular course.